Cassidy Chun stood in the recruitment office, staring at the screen in front of her. Her finger shook slightly as she moved to press the sign button. This was it. This was her way out of the life she had known on the outer colonies. Behind her, she could hear voices. Young men and women from Earth, from the rich core worlds, were laughing. They wore expensive clothes and had that clean, well-fed look that colony kids never had. One of them pointed at the recruitment poster on the wall and snorted. "Look at that propaganda!" "Join the Sixth Fleet and see the universe," the boy said, his voice dripping with mockery. "More like join the Sixth Fleet and die in some forgotten corner of space." His friends laughed. A girl with perfect hair chimed in. "Who even joins the military anymore?" "Only desperate people from the fringe." Cassidy felt her face burn, but she kept her eyes on the screen. She was from the fringe. From a mining colony where children learned to fix broken air recyclers before they learned to read properly. Where food was rationed and every day was a fight to survive. The recruitment officer, a man named Santos with gray hair and tired eyes, looked at her. "You sure about this, kid?" "Third time applying. Most people give up after one rejection." Cassidy nodded. "I'm sure." Santos sighed and typed something into his computer. "Your test scores are good. Real good, actually. But your cultural integration assessment." He paused. "The system flagged you again. Says you don't fit the profile." "What profile?" Cassidy asked, though she already knew the answer. "The profile that says you grew up on Earth or one of the major colonies. That you went to the right schools. That you know the right people." Santos leaned back in his chair. "The Sixth Fleet likes to pretend it takes everyone, but the truth is, they prefer people who already belong." Cassidy felt something break inside her. 3 times. She had tried 3 times, and every time the system found a reason to say no. Behind her, the laughter continued. Then Santos did something unexpected. He leaned forward and entered an override code. "But I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I know what makes a good soldier. It's not where you come from. It's what you're willing to do when everything goes wrong." The screen changed. The contract appeared, glowing green with acceptance. "Welcome to the Sixth Fleet," Santos said quietly. Cassidy pressed her thumb to the scanner. The moment she did, her personal device buzzed. A message from Marcus, her childhood friend who had managed to get into a core world university. She opened it and saw a laughing emoji, followed by words that stung. "Give it 3 months before you wash out?" She turned off the device and stood up. Santos handed her a data chip with her orders. "Transport leaves in 2 hours. Dock 7, don't be late." As Cassidy walked out of the office, she passed the group of rich kids. They were still laughing, still mocking. None of them were signing up. None of them had to. They had futures already planned out, handed to them by birth. She made her way through Luna Station, the massive space facility that orbited Earth. Through the windows, she could see the blue planet below. It looked beautiful from here, peaceful. She had only been allowed to visit Earth twice in her life, both times for testing and interviews. Each time she had felt like an outsider, like someone who didn't belong in the clean streets and tall buildings. Dock 7 was crowded with other recruits. Cassidy immediately recognized her own kind. These weren't the confident, well-dressed cadets from the academy. These were the desperate ones. Colony kids with patched clothes and wary eyes. Refugees from border worlds that had been raided by pirates. A few older people who looked like they had run out of options. A transport officer called them forward, checking identification chips. Cassidy joined the line, clutching her small bag of belongings. Everything she owned fit in one bag? First time off colony? A voice asked next to her. Cassidy turned to see a young man, maybe 20, with the lean build of someone who grew up in low gravity. His accent marked him as being from the Belt colonies. "Second time," Cassidy replied. "You? First, name's Devon." He held out his hand. She shook it. "Cassidy, you hear what ship we're assigned to?" Devon asked. "The Tenacious. It's a frigate in the Sixth Fleet." Devon made a face. "The Sixth Fleet, the discount military?" "That's what my brother calls it." Says they get all the old ships and the missions nobody else wants. Maybe that's where we belong, Cassidy said. Surprising herself with the bitterness in her voice, the line moved forward. One by one, recruits boarded the transport. Through the windows, Cassidy could see other transports heading to different destinations. Bigger, newer ships for the prestigious First and Second Fleets. Those ships carried Academy graduates, officers' children, people with futures. Their transport was old, with worn seats and flickering lights. As it lifted away from Luna Station, Cassidy pressed her face to the window and watched Earth shrink below them. That beautiful blue marble that represented everything humanity had built. Everything she would probably never have. The transport shook as it accelerated. Around her, other recruits talked nervously or sat in silence. Some looked excited. Most looked scared. Devin leaned over. "You think we'll see combat?" Cassidy shrugged. The recruitment officer said it's mostly patrol duty. Checking on border colonies. Escorting supply ships. Boring stuff, Devin said, but he sounded relieved. As the hours passed, Cassidy dozed fitfully. She dreamed of her home colony. Of her mother working double shifts in the processing plant. Of her younger sister asking when Cassidy would come back. She had promised to send money home. Promised that military service would give them a better life. When she woke, Earth was gone. Ahead, through the cockpit windows, she could see other ships. The Sixth Fleet. They looked old and battered compared to the sleek vessels she had seen in recruitment videos. The transport pilot's voice came over the speakers. "Welcome to the Sixth Fleet, recruits. You're about to board the Tenacious. She's not pretty, but she's home now." As they approached the frigate, Cassidy studied it through the window. The hull was scarred and patched in places. Some of the paint had worn away, revealing bare metal. It looked tired. Used up. Just like us, Cassidy thought. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic thud. The airlock hissed open. An officer stood waiting, his uniform crisp despite being on an old ship. He looked at them with the expression of someone examining a disappointing purchase. "Welcome aboard," he said without warmth. "I'm Lieutenant Parker. I'll be your training officer. Form a line and follow me. Try not to embarrass yourselves." As Cassidy stepped onto the Tenacious, she realized something. Nobody had saluted their arrival. Nobody had welcomed them with ceremony or respect. They were just bodies filling empty positions on a ship nobody important cared about. She thought of Marcus's message. 3 months. He had given her 3 months before she failed. Cassidy tightened her grip on her bag and followed Lieutenant Parker into the ship's corridor. The metal walls hummed with the sound of machinery. The air smelled like oil and recycled atmosphere. This was her life now. No going back. She would prove them all wrong. Every person who had laughed. Every system that had rejected her. Every voice that said she didn't belong. She didn't know how yet. But she would find a way. The Tenacious's corridors swallowed the line of new recruits. And somewhere in the distance, an alarm blared for a drill. It was beginning. 6 months had passed since Cassidy boarded the Tenacious. 6 long months of learning to be invisible. She worked in Section 7, deep in the belly of the ship where most officers never visited. It was the maintenance section, where pipes leaked and artificial gravity failed twice a week. When gravity went out, everything floated. Tools, waste, people. Cassidy had learned to strap herself down and keep working. Her commanding officers barely knew her name. She had heard Lieutenant Parker call her that colony girl more than once. The Core World officers ran the ship like it was their private club. They promoted their friends, their academy classmates, people from the right families. People like Cassidy just did the dirty work and stayed out of sight. Devin had washed out after 2 months. He couldn't handle the way the officers treated them, couldn't stomach being invisible. He was sent back to civilian life, another failed recruit from the fringe. Cassidy stayed. She fixed pipes and cleaned filters and learned every centimeter of the ship's maintenance systems. She made herself useful in ways that didn't require anyone to notice her. The Tenacious spent most of its time on routine, patrols near the Helix Nebula. It was boring work, exactly like Devin had said. They would scan empty space, check on automated beacons, and return to base. Week after week of nothing. Until the day they found something. The sensor officer picked it up first. A structure, massive and ancient, floating in the nebula. It was clearly not human. The metal was wrong, the design alien. It had been there for thousands of years, maybe longer, silent and dark. Commander Reeves, the ship's second-in-command, organized a science team. They would take a shuttle, board the structure, and investigate. It was the most exciting thing that had happened in months. Cassidy watched from Section 7 as the shuttle launched. Through the internal monitors, she could see the scientists in their clean suits, looking nervous and excited. Commander Reeves led them personally. He wanted the glory of first contact with alien technology. 2 hours later, everything went wrong. The shuttle's engines failed inside the structure. Some kind of electromagnetic field was interfering with their systems. The communication was breaking up, full of static, but Cassidy could hear enough to understand. They were trapped. The field was getting stronger, and their shuttle would be torn apart if they tried to use the engines. On the bridge, the officers panicked. The captain ordered the Tenacious to move closer, but the same field that trapped the shuttle would damage the frigate. They were too big, too slow. Someone suggested waiting, hoping the field would weaken. Cassidy listened to it all through the ship's internal communication system. She sat in Section 7, surrounded by maintenance equipment, and realized something. Nobody was going to save those people. The officers were too scared. Too concerned with protecting the ship and their own careers, she stood up and walked to the equipment locker. Inside was a maintenance pod, a small one-person craft used for hull repairs. It was basically a metal box with thrusters and some tools. Not meant for rescue missions. Not meant for anything except fixing the outside of the ship, but it was small. Much smaller than the shuttle. Maybe small enough to avoid the worst of the electromagnetic field. Cassidy opened a communication channel to the bridge. "This is Technician Chun in Section 7. I can reach them." There was a long pause. Then Lieutenant Parker's voice. "Who?" "Chun, what are you talking about?" "The science team? I can take a maintenance pod through the field. It's small enough." Another pause. She could hear arguing in the background. Then Commander Reeves's voice, weak and full of static. He was still in the shuttle. "Let her try. We have maybe 20 minutes before hull breach." The captain didn't want to. Cassidy could hear it in his voice when he finally agreed. "If you die, Chun, it's on your head." Authorization granted. Cassidy suited up and climbed into the maintenance pod. It was cramped, barely enough room to move. The controls were simple because the pod wasn't meant for complicated flying. Just point and thrust. She launched from the Tenacious and immediately felt the electromagnetic field. It was like flying through a storm. The pod shook and twisted. Her instruments went crazy, needles spinning and screens flickering. She flew blind, using only the Mark I eyeball, as her instructor used to say. Her own 2 eyes, the alien structure loomed ahead, massive and dark. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Angles that didn't make sense. Metal that seemed to absorb light. She could see the shuttle trapped inside, held by the field like an insect in amber. Cassidy navigated by instinct. She had grown up flying mining equipment through asteroid fields. This wasn't that different. Dangerous, yes. Impossible, maybe. But not that different. The maintenance pod had tools for cutting through ship hulls. She positioned herself next to the shuttle and started cutting. The laser torch worked slowly, too slowly. Inside the shuttle, she could see faces pressed against the windows. Scientists watching her, hoping. The cut took 15 minutes. When she finally pulled away a section of hull, the electromagnetic field surged. The pod spun wildly. Cassidy fought the controls, her hands moving automatically from years of practice. "Move!" she shouted into the communication system. "One at a time, jump to the pod?" They did. One scientist, then another, then another. 6 people total, including Commander Reeves. They clung to the outside of the pod, to the handholds meant for technicians doing repairs. The pod wasn't meant to carry this many people. It groaned and shuddered. Cassidy didn't think about whether it would work. She just flew. Back through the electromagnetic storm, back toward the Tenacious. The pod's engines screamed. Warning lights flashed. The whole craft felt like it would tear apart, but it didn't. They made it. The Tenacious pulled them in, and the scientists tumbled onto the dock, shaking and grateful. Commander Reeves stood last. He looked at Cassidy, really looked at her for the first time. "You saved our lives, Technician Chun." "Just doing my job, sir," Cassidy said. The science team had recovered data from the alien structure. Information about faster-than-light travel that humanity had never understood. Principles of physics that could change everything. It was the most important discovery in decades. Cassidy received a commendation. A formal note in her file praising her quick thinking and bravery. Commander Reeves wrote it himself. A week later, she was back in Section 7, fixing a leaking coolant pipe. The commendation was filed away in some database. The officers went back to forgetting her name. The discovery from the alien structure was sent to research stations in the core worlds, where important scientists would study it. Life returned to normal. Patrols and routine. Invisible work done by invisible people, but something had changed. Cassidy realized she could do things the officers couldn't. Not because she was smarter, but because she had nothing to lose. They worried about careers and reputations. She just worried about survival. That made her dangerous. She didn't know it yet, but that would matter soon, because something was coming. Something that would make electromagnetic fields and alien structures seem like simple problems, and when it arrived, all the training and all the academy education in the universe wouldn't matter. Only survival would matter. Cassidy went back to work, her hands covered in coolant, her uniform stained and worn. Around her, the Tenacious hummed and rattled. An old ship, doing old work, crewed by people nobody important cared about, for now. That was enough, but deep in space, in the darkness between stars, something was moving. Something that had noticed humanity. Something hungry. The war was coming. 2 years after the alien structure incident, Cassidy was a junior lieutenant. Not because anyone recognized her talent, but because she simply refused to quit. The officers who died or transferred out left empty positions. Someone had to fill them. Eventually, even the Sixth Fleet ran out of academy graduates willing to serve on ships like the Tenacious. The promotion meant little. She still worked the difficult shifts. Still got the assignments nobody wanted. But at least now she had a small cabin instead of a shared bunk, and people had to salute her. Even if they didn't mean it. Then the Thera came. Nobody knew where they originated. They appeared simultaneously across human space, attacking colonies and ships with technology humanity couldn't match. Their vessels moved in ways that violated physics. Their weapons passed through shields like they weren't there. The first week, humanity lost 15 ships. The second week, 30 more. By the third week, 40% of the human fleet was destroyed or missing. The news reports tried to stay calm, but Cassidy could read between the lines. Humanity was losing, badly. The Thera weren't interested in communication. They consumed everything they touched. Planets, stations, ships. They broke things down to atoms and absorbed the material. They were less like an army and more like a force of nature. A hurricane that thought and planned the core worlds, protected by massive defense stations and the best ships in the fleet, weathered the attacks. Earth was safe. New Mars was safe. The major colonies that housed billions of people had protection. The fringe colonies, places like where Cassidy grew up, were left exposed. The military made calculations. Strategic decisions? Some places couldn't be defended. Some populations were acceptable losses. Cassidy's home colony was on the list of places to abandon. She saw the classified document by accident, left open on a console in Section 7. Her mother and sister were there. Everyone she had grown up with. 20,000 people, acceptable losses. The Tenacious was assigned to a defensive line near the border. 12 ships, all of them old frigates and destroyers from the Sixth Fleet, positioned to slow down the Sara advance. To buy time for the core worlds to strengthen their defenses. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission. The ships were old. The crews were inexperienced. They were speed bumps, nothing more. On the third day of holding the line, a Kthara dreadnought appeared. It was massive, bigger than anything humanity had built. It moved through space like a shark through water, smooth and terrifying. The other ships in the defensive line scattered or were destroyed. The Tenacious stood alone on the bridge. The captain froze. He stared at the tactical display showing the dreadnought approaching. His hands shook. Around him, the bridge crew panicked. Some suggested running. Others suggested surrender. Though nobody knew if the Kthara even accepted surrender, Cassidy was on the bridge as junior tactical officer. She watched the dreadnought approach and felt a strange calm settle over her. This was it. This was how she died. In an old ship, in a forgotten corner of space, protecting colonies that the core worlds had already written off. But then she saw something. The alien structure data. The information they had recovered 2 years ago. It had included details about navigation systems. The way the ancient aliens moved through space using quantum entanglement markers. She had read the reports during boring patrol shifts. Most of it went over her head, but she remembered the basics, and the Kthara ships moved similarly. Not the same, but similar enough. "Captain," Cassidy said. Her voice was steady. "I know how they navigate." The captain didn't seem to hear her. He was still staring at the screen. Commander Reeves, now the first officer, turned to look at her. "Explain." "They use quantum markers." "Like the ancient alien ships?" "They lock onto points in space and navigate between them." Cassidy pulled up the sensor data. "See this pattern? The dreadnought is locked onto a marker inside our defensive perimeter. It's using that to navigate, so?" Lieutenant Parker said. He looked pale and scared. "So if we disrupt the quantum field, we break their navigation. They'll be blind. How do we disrupt it?" Reeves asked. Cassidy's mind raced. "We use the entire power grid. Every reactor, every battery. We turn the Tenacious into a giant quantum disruptor. It would only last a few seconds, but it might be enough." "That would kill the ship," Parker said. "We'd have no power. No weapons, no shields, nothing." "We're dead anyway," Cassidy replied. She looked at Commander Reeves. "But if we disrupt their navigation first, we could run. Lead them into the accretion disk of the black hole near Grid 7. Let gravity do what our weapons can't." The bridge went silent. Everyone was looking at her now. This colony girl, this technician who had somehow become an officer, proposing something impossible. Commander Reeves made the decision. "Do it," the captain tried to object, but Reeves overrode him. Battle situations allowed for field command decisions. Reeves took command and ordered the crew to follow Cassidy's plan. They worked fast. Every available technician rerouted power to the quantum disruptor array that Cassidy designed on the fly. It wasn't elegant. It probably wouldn't work. But it was something. The Kthara dreadnought was close now. Close enough that they could see details on its hull. Organic-looking metal that pulsed with strange light. Weapons charging, now. Cassidy shouted. The Tenacious released every bit of power it had in one massive pulse. The quantum field around them shattered like glass. Space itself seemed to ripple. The Kthara dreadnought stopped. For the first time, it hesitated. Its smooth movement became erratic. All power to engines. Reeves ordered. The Tenacious ran. With no shields and no weapons, it was just a metal box flying through space. But it was fast. Faster than anyone expected from such an old ship. The dreadnought followed, but it was navigating blind now. It moved slower, uncertain. Cassidy plotted the course. Straight toward the black hole. The gravitational pull was already affecting both ships. "We need to break away at the last second," she said. "If we time it right, the dreadnought won't be able to follow." "And if we time it wrong?" Parker asked. "Then we all die anyway," Cassidy said. The black hole loomed ahead. Its accretion disk glowed with the light of matter being torn apart. Beautiful and deadly. The Tenacious shook as gravity pulled at it. "Now!" Cassidy called out. The Tenacious fired its thrusters and pulled away, using the black hole's gravity to slingshot around it. The maneuver was violent. People were thrown against walls. Equipment broke free and flew through corridors. The Thara dreadnought tried to follow, but couldn't react fast enough. It was too massive, too slow without its navigation systems. Gravity caught it and pulled it into the accretion disk. Through the sensors, they watched the dreadnought tear apart. The massive ship, which had seemed invincible, was ripped to pieces by forces even the Thara couldn't resist. The Tenacious drifted in space, powerless and damaged. 17% hull integrity. Life support running on backup batteries. But alive, they had won. Humanity's first real victory against the Thara, and it had come from a junior lieutenant that most officers still called that colony girl. When the rescue ships arrived 6 hours later, the crew of the Tenacious was hailed as heroes. The news networks played footage of the dreadnought's destruction on repeat. Analysts studied what the Tenacious had done, trying to understand how such an old ship had achieved the impossible. Cassidy was promoted to commander. She received medals. Her name appeared in reports, but what she cared about most was the order that came 3 days later. Her home colony was being reinforced. The military was sending ships and supplies. They weren't acceptable losses anymore. Someone had decided the fringe mattered after all. Cassidy stood in her new cabin, looking at her reflection in the small mirror. Commander's insignia on her collar, scars from the battle on her face. She looked tired. She looked hard. She looked like a soldier. The war wasn't over. The Thara still controlled huge sections of space. But now humanity knew they could be beaten. Now there was hope, and Cassidy-chan, the girl they had mocked and ignored, was at the center of it all. Commander Cassidy-chan's promotion came with an unexpected assignment. The military was giving her a ship. Not a sleek cruiser or a prestigious battleship, but the Indomitable, a carrier that had been damaged so badly in the early days of the war that most engineers said it couldn't be repaired. She stood in the shipyard, looking up at the massive vessel. Entire sections of hull were missing. The flight deck was scorched black. Weapon systems hung loose like broken bones. "They're giving you a wreck," Commander Reeves said beside her. He had been transferred to a flagship, a proper posting for an officer of his rank. But he had come to see her off. "They're giving me a chance," Cassidy corrected. "In their own way." Reeves smiled sadly. "You know what this is, right? They can't ignore you anymore, not after what you did. But they also can't give you anything important. So they give you the Indomitable and hope you quietly fade away." Cassidy nodded. "I know, but they made one mistake." "What's that?" "They let me choose my own crew." Over the next 3 months, Cassidy rebuilt the Indomitable. Not just the ship, but everything it represented. She put out a call for volunteers. Not to the academy. Not to the core world recruiting stations. She sent her message to the fringe colonies, to the refugee camps. To the places where people had lost everything to the Thara, they came. Hundreds of them. Colony kids like her who knew how to fix things with spare parts and hope. Washouts from other ships who didn't fit the military's proper image. Veterans who had seen too much and couldn't go back to civilian life. They called themselves Shun's ghosts. Because the military had written them off as dead already, Cassidy didn't train them like regular soldiers. She couldn't. They didn't have time for proper military discipline. Instead, she trained them like colonists, improvise, adapt, turn every weakness into a weapon. If your shields fail, ram the enemy. If your weapons jam, use the ship as a missile. Fight dirty and fight smart. The core world officers called her methods undisciplined, dangerous, barely military. But the ghosts loved her for it. She treated them like people, not like disposable equipment. The Indomitable launched 4 months after Cassidy took command. It still looked rough. Patched hull plates in different colors. Weapon systems cobbled together from 3 different ship classes. But it flew. And more importantly, it fought. Cassidy's first mission was supposed to be simple escort duty. But she ignored those orders. Instead, she took the Indomitable deep into Thara-controlled space. She hit supply lines, destroyed automated mining stations, rescued survivors from occupied colonies that the military had officially abandoned, she used the tactics she had learned from the alien structure data. The tactics that nobody else bothered to study. She understood that the Thera were powerful but predictable. They relied on their technology being superior. They didn't expect humans to fight like desperate animals. Her raids became legendary. The fringe colonies started calling her the Reaper. Volunteers flooded her recruitment. Young people from destroyed worlds who wanted revenge. Older people who had lost families and had nothing left but rage. Within a year, Cassidy had liberated 3 occupied systems. She lost ships, lost crew members. The ghosts paid in blood for every victory. But they won. Again and again they won. The core world military establishment didn't know what to do with her. She violated regulations constantly. She ignored proper chain of command. She fought battles she wasn't authorized to fight. But her success rate was undeniable. Cassidy Chun got results. Then came New Geneva. It was a core world planet, rich and important. Home to 5 billion people. The kind of place that had denied refugee status to Cassidy's family years ago. The kind of place that represented everything she had been excluded from. The Thara attacked with a massive fleet. 12 dreadnoughts supported by hundreds of smaller vessels. The defense stations fought hard but were overwhelmed. The proper military ships retreated to regroup. Cassidy didn't retreat. She took the Indomitable and 15 ghost ships straight into the Thara fleet. It was suicide. Everyone said so. The military commanders ordered her to fall back. She ignored them. What happened next would be studied for decades. Cassidy used every dirty trick she knew. She sent ships on collision courses with dreadnoughts, using them as bombs. She lured enemy vessels into firing on each other. She exploited the quantum navigation weakness she had discovered years ago, creating disruption fields that blinded the Thara. She lost 8 ships. Thousands of her crew died. But she held the line long enough for New Geneva's population to evacuate. 5 billion people survived because the ghosts were willing to die. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it was over, the Thara fleet was destroyed. The Indomitable was burning and barely functional. Cassidy herself was injured, her left arm broken and her face covered in blood from a head wound. But New Geneva was saved, the planet that had turned away refugees. The planet that represented all the privilege and exclusion of the core worlds. Saved by the very people it had rejected. The military couldn't ignore her anymore. They couldn't quietly let her fade away. Cassidy Chun was a hero, whether they liked it or not. A month later, she was summoned to the Strategic Command Council on Luna Station. The same station where she had enlisted years ago. Where people had laughed at her. She walked into the council chamber wearing her uniform. It was clean but worn. She didn't have the perfect appearance of core world officers. She had scars and calluses. She looked like what she was, a fighter. The admirals and generals sat around a long table. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked openly hostile. They didn't want her here. But they needed her. Admiral Kowalski, the head of Strategic Command, spoke first. Commander Chun, your actions at New Geneva were ... impressive, but highly irregular. They worked, sir, Cassidy said. This isn't about whether they worked. This is about chain of command. Military discipline? You disobeyed direct orders. Cassidy met his eyes. I saved 5 billion people. Another admiral, a woman named Torres, leaned forward. We've been analyzing your tactics, your understanding of the Thara. You've won battles that should have been impossible. We need that expertise. Then give me the resources to use it, Cassidy said. That's why you're here, Kowalski replied. We want your assessment of the war. Honest assessment. And we want to know if you think we can win. Cassidy took a deep breath. This was it. The moment she had been building toward. We're losing, she said bluntly. Not because the Thara are stronger, but because we're fighting the wrong war with the wrong assumptions. Explain, Torres said. For the next hour, Cassidy laid out everything she had learned. The quantum navigation systems. The way the Thara communicated through their ships. The central nexus that coordinated their entire species. She explained that the Thara weren't invading. They were expanding. Like a virus or a tide. You couldn't negotiate with them. You couldn't frighten them away, but you could break them. There's a central nexus, Cassidy explained. A dimensional fold space where their collective consciousness exists. If we can reach it, if we can deliver a quantum resonance weapon directly into their consciousness, we can fragment them. Break their unity. That's insane, an admiral said. We'd need to go into fold space. Our ships can't survive that. Some ships can, Cassidy said. Modified ships. Crewed by people who know how to improvise when everything goes wrong. She saw understanding dawn in their eyes. They knew what she was suggesting. You want to lead the mission, Kowalski said. Yes, sir, it's a suicide mission. Maybe, but it's the only way to end the war. The council argued for hours. Some said it was too risky. Others said it was impossible. But in the end, they approved it. Not because they believed in Cassidy, but because they were desperate and out of options. As she left the council chamber, Admiral Torres caught up with her. Why are you doing this? You could retire. You've done enough. You're a hero. Cassidy thought about her answer. I'm doing this because nobody else will. Because the fringe colonies are still burning while the core worlds debate strategy. Because someone has to finish this. Torres nodded slowly. You're going to die, you know. Even if the mission succeeds. Probably, Cassidy agreed. But that's okay. I've been dying since the day I enlisted. This time, at least, it'll matter. She walked away, leaving Torres standing alone in the corridor. The final offensive was being planned. The mission that would end the war or doom humanity. And Cassidy Chun, the girl they had mocked, would lead it, because she was already dead. She just hadn't stopped moving yet. The fleet assembled near the edge of known space. 70 ships, most of them ghost vessels crewed by fringe colonists. They were the rejects, the unwanted, the desperate, but they were willing to do what others weren't. They were willing to die. Cassidy stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the tactical display. Each ship represented hundreds of lives. People who trusted her. People who believed in her. She felt the weight of it crushing her chest. All ships reporting ready, Admiral. Her communications officer said, Admiral, they had promoted her before the mission. The youngest admiral in human history. Some said it was an honor. Cassidy knew it was just politics. If she succeeded, they could claim they supported her. If she failed, they could blame her rank for giving her too much authority. Begin the operation, Cassidy ordered. The fleet moved toward the coordinates where fold space intersected with normal space. It was a tier in reality, a place where physics broke down. The Cthara nexus existed on the other side. Their collective consciousness. The thing that coordinated billions of individual organisms across hundreds of star systems. As they approached, space began to look wrong. Colors shifted. Distances became meaningless. Ships that were far away appeared close, and close ships seemed distant. The Cthara were waiting. Of course they were. They knew humanity was coming. They poured out of fold space like nightmares made real. Hundreds of ships, thousands, all linked to the central consciousness. The battle began. It was chaos from the first moment. Ships exploded. Weapons fire crossed in every direction. The ghost crews fought with everything they had. They rammed enemy vessels. They used damaged ships as bombs. They died bravely and terribly. Cassidy watched the tactical display as ship icons winked out one by one. Each one was a crew she knew, people she had trained, eaten with, laughed with. Each one was a death she was responsible for, but they were moving forward. Slowly, at terrible cost, they pushed toward the fold space entrance. Devon's voice came over the communication channel. Her old friend from the first transport, the one who had washed out, had rejoined the military when the war started. He commanded one of the ghost destroyers. "They're coming through my shields," he said. His voice was calm despite the circumstances. "I'm going to ram that dreadnought. Clear a path for you." "Devon, wait," Cassidy started to say, but his ship was already accelerating. She watched his icon on the display. Watched it collide with the Thera dreadnought. Both ships exploded in a flash of light bright enough to temporarily blind the sensors. The path was clear. All ships, follow the Indomitable, Cassidy ordered. We're going through. The carrier plunged into fold space. Reality broke apart around them. The hull groaned and twisted. Some crew members screamed. Others prayed. Cassidy held onto her command chair and kept her eyes on the navigation display. Fold space was beautiful and horrifying. They were inside the Kthara consciousness. Around them, geometric shapes pulsed with alien thought. Colors that didn't exist in normal space. Sounds that bypassed ears and went straight into the brain. Some crew members went mad. Some simply stopped functioning, their minds overwhelmed. But enough remained sane to keep the ship moving. Behind the Indomitable, 36 other ships had followed. 36 out of 70. The rest were destroyed or couldn't make the transition. The Kthara Nexus appeared ahead. It was impossible to describe. A structure that existed in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. A consciousness made physical. The heart of the enemy, Cassidy armed the quantum resonance weapon. It was based on the alien technology they had found years ago, modified and weaponized. It would break the quantum entanglement that held the Thera consciousness together, fragment them into individuals. Take away the thing that made them unstoppable, but to use it, they had to get close. Very close. The remaining ghost ships formed a protective screen around the Indomitable. They fought off Kthara vessels that appeared from nowhere. Reality itself seemed to fight them. Cassidy's ship shook as something tore through the hull. Sections of the carrier vented atmosphere. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, sealing off dying crew members. We're close enough, her tactical officer said. Fire the weapon. Cassidy's finger hovered over the control. This was it. The moment everything came down to success or extinction. She fired. The quantum resonance weapon released. It wasn't visible, not in normal terms, but everyone felt it. A pulse that traveled through dimensions, through the fabric of space itself. It struck the Kthara Nexus. The Nexus shattered. It didn't explode. It just broke like a mirror hit with a hammer. The unified consciousness fragmented into billions of pieces. Individual Thara organisms suddenly alone for the first time in their species' existence. The effect was immediate. The Kthara ships stopped coordinating. They drifted, confused. Some attacked each other. Some simply shut down, but the victory came with a price. Fold space was collapsing. The Nexus had been holding it stable. Without it, the dimensional tier was closing. The remaining ghost ships were trapped. All ships, emergency jump out, Cassidy ordered. Now, ships tried to escape. Some made it. Most didn't. Cassidy watched as icons disappeared from her display. Ships caught in collapsing space, crushed out of existence. The Indomitable was too damaged to jump. Its engines were failing. Half the ship was gone? Abandon ship, Cassidy ordered. All crew to escape pods. Her bridge crew refused. We're not leaving you, her tactical officer said. That's an order. With respect, Admiral, go to hell? Cassidy would have smiled if she wasn't so tired. Even now, they fought for her. The ship broke apart. Sections tore away into the void. Cassidy found herself in a lifeboat launched automatically by the ship's emergency systems. Around her, other lifeboats tumbled through space as fold space finally collapsed completely. She watched the Indomitable die. The great carrier that she had rebuilt. That had become home. It twisted and shattered, pulled apart by forces no ship could withstand. Then everything went black. Cassidy woke in a medical bay. White walls. Clean sheets. The smell of antiseptic. She was alive. Her body was broken. Ribs cracked. Internal injuries, burns but alive. The war was over. The Kthara consciousness was shattered. Across human space, the enemy vessels had stopped fighting. The organisms that remained were confused and harmless. Some were even trying to communicate, newly individual minds reaching out. Humanity had won. The cost had been terrible. 37 ships lost in the final battle. 1,700 crew members dead. But billions saved. 3 months later, Cassidy stood on Luna Station again. Admiral Chun, the youngest in history. The hero who ended the war. The ceremony was massive. Politicians who had once called her fringe trash now praised her. Officers who had denied her promotions now saluted. Academy classmates who had mocked her enlistment now wanted to shake her hand. Marcus was in the crowd. Her old friend who had sent the laughing emoji years ago. He was crying. They wanted to name the recruitment office after her. They had speeches prepared. Medals to present. They wanted to make her a symbol. Cassidy walked to the podium. She looked at all the important people. The generals and admirals. The politicians. The news cameras. She thought about the 1,700 names on the Indomitables memorial. The ghost crews who died so these people could live. Devon and all the others, they had given her a speech to read. Inspiring words about duty and sacrifice. She ignored it. I enlisted to serve, Cassidy said into the microphone. To protect people. To make sure others didn't have to grow up the way I did, wondering if their colony would survive another year. She removed her admiral's insignia. The pins that showed her rank. These don't belong to me. They belong to every person who died. Every ghost who flew into fold space knowing they wouldn't come back. She placed the insignia at the base of the memorial. The fringe colonies still need rebuilding. The war might be over, but people are still suffering. And that matters more than ceremonies. Cassidy turned and walked out. Behind her, silence. Shocked silence. Nobody knew what to say. She boarded a transport heading back to the fringe. Back to the colonies that still needed help. This time she had resources. Ships and supplies and people willing to work. As the transport lifted off, Cassidy looked out the window at Luna Station. At Earth below. Beautiful and distant, she had left once as a girl they mocked. She returned as a hero they saluted. Now she was leaving again, not as either, but as someone who understood what really mattered. The station disappeared behind them. Ahead, the fringe colonies waited. Damaged worlds that needed rebuilding. People who needed hope. At the recruitment office she had just left, a young woman from the colonies stood looking at the memorial. Reading the names. Reading Cassidy Chun's story. The recruiting officer, old Santos, who had overridden the system years ago, watched her. You thinking about enlisting? He asked. The young woman nodded. I want to make a difference. Like she did. Santos smiled. Then let me tell you what really makes a soldier. It's not where you come from. It's what you're willing to do when everything goes wrong. He entered an override code into his computer. The cycle began again. But this time there was hope instead of mockery. This time the fringe kids knew they could matter. Cassidy Chun had shown them the way. Far from Luna Station, on a transport heading to the outer colonies, Cassidy slept. She dreamed of her mother and sister. Of home. Of the work that still needed to be done. She had been mocked for enlisting. She had been saluted for her return, but what mattered most was that she had never stopped fighting. For the people who couldn't fight for themselves. For the colonies nobody important cared about. For the future where nobody had to be invisible. The transport flew on through the darkness. Behind it, a changed humanity. Ahead, a future worth building. And somewhere in between, a girl from the fringe who refused to quit, still working, still serving, still making a difference. The story was over. The legend was just beginning.